aware, this will be recorded and put out at a later time. So, okay, if you can just give me the thumbs up when we're ready. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the July Audit Committee. First item on the agenda is membership, and it's just to mention that Councillor Reid of the Liberal Democrats group will be on this committee as of the next meeting. Would have been on this meeting, but it is on leave at the present, I understand. So we will welcome Councillor Reid at the next meeting. Apologies for absence, Andrea.
We have apologies from Councillors Grimshaw, Reid and David Towns. Excellent, thank you. But we are still quorate, so that's fine. The minutes of the last meeting, I'm not proposing to do a page by page on this, just to take any questions and to accept if they're a true and accurate record. Councillor Daly, you have a question?
Yes, just to say thank you very much from Kevin for responding yesterday with all the requests we made at the last meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the minutes from the last meeting, Councillor Sesford.
Just a small point, councillors. Peter's down as a councillor, is not.
Right, yes, Peter's our independent member, so he's not a councillor, so yes, that's a point. Okay, thank you. But apart from that, can we take these minutes as correct and an accurate record? Thank you. We'll move on from there. We have disclosure of members' interest. Now, this is slightly changed in terms of the text from what we normally see at this juncture. So I think it's worth probably going through this just a little bit in this form, just as this is the first time we've seen this. I'm not proposing to do that at every single meeting, but just so we're all clear. Unless already entered in the Council's Register of Members' Interests, members are required, where a matter arises at a meeting, which directly relates to disclosable pecuniary interest, are set out in Appendix B, Table 1 of the Code of Conduct, to disclose the interest, not participate in any discussion or vote, and not to remain in the room. Where members have a DPI, or if the matter concerns an executive function and has been considered by a Cabinet member with a DPI, they must notify the monitoring officer and arrange for somebody else to deal with the matter, which directly relates to the financial interest or well-being of another registrable interest. That's set out in Appendix B, Table 2 of the Code of Conduct, to disclose the interest and only speak on the matter if members of the public are also allowed to speak at the meeting, but otherwise must not take part in any discussion or vote on the matter and must not remain in the room. C, which directly relates to the financial interest or well-being, it is not a DPI, or the financial well-being of a relative or close associate, to declare the interest, and members may only speak on the matter if members of the public are also allowed to speak. Otherwise, the member must not take part in discussion or vote on the matter and must leave the room. And D, which affects the financial well-being of the member or relative, a close association or body included under the other registrable interest column in Table 2, to disclose the interest and apply the test set out in paragraph 9 of Appendix B before deciding whether they remain in the meeting. And finally, E, where members have or a Cabinet member has an other registrable interest or non-registrable interest in a matter being considered in exercise of their executive function, they must notify the monitoring officer and arrange for somebody else to deal with it. And any members needing clarifications must contact the monitoring officer, and members are referred to the Code of Conduct, which contains the matters above in full. Now, I'm not proposing to read that out at every single meeting, but as it has changed, I thought it was worth going on record and making sure we're all clear that this is what we're actually signing up to when we talk about declarations of interest. So it's a little bit more prescriptive and a little bit more clear, I think, than it used to be in the previous agendas. Okay, well, moving on from that. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Sashford.
I'm a retired member of the Tynemere Metropolitan Fire Brigade, whose pension fund is now managed by the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So I shall not take part in item 9. Okay, thank you for disclosing that. Thank you. Okay, any more? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move on from that one to the monitoring report and action log, which is on pages 13 to 20 of your pack, which is item number 5. Okay, and
taking the first two items on the grid that we have there. The first one is reference 1. This was dated the 23rd of March this year, which was the report from Kpmg. Our action was the report was to be scheduled for discussion at a future meeting of the Audit Committee, and the report is indeed scheduled to be discussed today. It's on today's agenda. So that one can be crossed off. Item number 2 on here was from the same meeting, the 23rd of March, and it was the external audit report. Councillor Oliver had queried whether the revaluation reserve error in the Northumberland County Council group account would impact on the corporation tax, and I think the Section 1501 officer has agreed to respond, but is waiting for the 2021 accounts to be finalised in full, and that's still the situation at the present time, I understand, Jack. Okay, so that remains on our action card. We move on to the work programme. So we have here from the meeting on the 27th of July, 2 pieces from internal audit and risk management that have been moved on from May. Is that correct, Kevin? Internal audit charter and risk management update. So they'd actually originally been in the May meeting, but actually were given a short verbal update, I think, at the time. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so they've been moved forward. Corporate finance, we've got the FPS Local Pension Board annual report, the Kpmg Forensic Independent Review Advanced Northumberland Group, which is in today's meeting, the Section 114 report by the Section 151 officer, external audit update on 2021, which we're going to have, education and safeguarding performance, yes, we're going to have that as well. 2 colleagues are going to present that, and the Group Audit Committee report will be on today as well, Kevin. So they are all going to happen. So that's from our standing work programme. But I will note, by the way, that 8 items are already appearing in September's meeting that have been deferred from both this meeting and the May meeting, and even back to the March meeting, I think. So we're starting to bank up quite a few things which are moving back down the field, if you like, into the September meeting. So it's something to keep alive to, I think, as a committee, as we don't end up with so much stuff coming at later meetings in the later part of the year that we actually are almost timing ourselves out for some of these things. But September looks like, if all these things come to pass, it will be a very busy meeting. Okay, so that's as it is at the present time. So we'll move on for that, unless anybody has any questions on the action log. Okay. Moving on then to item number 6, which is the Kpmg Forensic Independent Review Advanced Northumberland, which is a report from the Interim Executive Director of Finance, the Section 151 Officer, Jan Willis, who is at the meeting now. Hello, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce the report, can I just remind members of the committee that the report itself, the Kpmg report itself, has been circulated to members of this committee only on a confidential basis. And so I think we need to be quite careful in the questioning not to disclose some of the detail around specific transactions within that report. So what my report focuses on are the key conclusions that KPMG came to in relation to the framework of governance in place at Advanced Northumberland, and those areas where action is needed to strengthen that framework and some of the specific internal controls. The final report was issued in March 2021, and I think it's fair to say that significant progress has been made over the past 18 months in strengthening some of those governance arrangements, and both officers of both Advance and council officers have been engaged in that continuing work programme. Advance have also established or re-established their own audit committee, and there is a programme of work which has been planned for this year. and my intention would be to feed in any issues that need attention highlighted in the Kpmg report into that work plan. So that would be something, I think, for Kevin to discuss with the chair of the Advanced Audit Committee. And then this committee would get assurance through that process as the group audit committee, including Advanced Northumberland. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time repeating what it says in the report, Chair, but I'm very happy to take any questions that members have.
Okay, thank you for that, Jan. Any questions? I'll open this up to the floor. Yeah, Councillor Oliver.
I wonder, Jan, whether you might give a sort of general flavour to the report, because there's been a lot of very adverse and damaging criticism of Advance, in my view, unfairly, in the press, sort of deliberately misleading opinion and so on. And this report, I think, was commissioned to put that to bed. And in your view, does that do that?
Well, nothing's ever perfect, Councillor Oliver, and it's clear from the report that there is still some more work to be done. But in terms of getting assurance that the governance arrangements are broadly fit for purpose, I think it does that. I think the difficulty that we've had with the Kpmg report is that the terms of reference were a bit of a curate's egg, in that, you know, the main focus was on the governance arrangements and whether they were fit for purpose, because they were largely inherited from Arch, so that was. That was the main focus. But then there were also, KPMG were also asked to look at some specific sort of legacy transactions as well. So some of the commentary in the report actually relates to what happened prior to the establishment of Advanced Northumberland, and clearly there are still some further issues of concern there that need to be followed up. But broadly speaking, the report says, you know, good progress has been made. And as I've said, even since the report was published, there has been further progress in terms of the governance and control arrangements. So I think that the committee can, you know, draw significant assurance from the report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Councillor Dale, you had a question.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. And just to add a little bit to what Councillor Oliver said, and the things that I've noted actually in your report, is that there is still a lack of governance, but basically it seems that there's not all the documents are available, so there's this sort of culture of informality when decisions are being taken, and this reads all throughout. So basically it's got informal this, informal that, informal processes, not available, things like that. So the big thing is that actually there's still not holdings governance of being actually open and transparent to probably the company directors, which I think is of great importance, because they're actually in, you know, they're holding the positions they are. So I think that it'll be interesting to go back, and I haven't seen what the informalities are, but they're there, they're noted. And I presume you'll be looking into that in the future to, in fact, ensure that it's tightened up. Because we've gone through a lot of this process, that there's so many things being done informally, nothing's noted. We just had a discussion earlier on about informality. You can't find this, you can't find that, and actually doesn't add up to good governance for any company or for the council itself.
Yeah, I think those points are very well made, Councillor Dale. Informality, I think, has been at the root of a lot of the governance issues. You know, decisions not being properly recorded, documentation not being adequate, or not being filed where it can be found, if it ever existed. And we continue to encounter instances of things that happened even prior to the establishment of Advance, where, you know, we can't locate paperwork, but it's becoming less of an issue. So You know, so as I said, a huge amount of work has been done, you know, at Advance to refresh all of their policies, get them approved by the board, to tighten up procedures. But there's still some way to go. But you're right. You know, when public money is being spent, it's really important that there is, you know, that there is proper and formal decision making and proper records are kept.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that unless anybody else has anything, I think that's positive. I think things are moving on. I think we know which direction this is all going now, and I think it looks like it's heading in a good direction. It's obviously going to be something which is going to come back to this committee at some future point with updates. But I think unless anybody has any further questions, I think we can close this one off for today and move on. So thank you for that, Jan. Sorry.
Could I just say one final thing before we move on, and that is the question had been asked whether the Kpmg report itself could be released to the public. A redacted version is being prepared, and I hope that will be released into the public domain shortly. There have been you know, there have been some complexities around data protection and commercial sensitivity that we've had to negotiate, but I think we do now have a redacted version, and so my expectation is that, you know, we will publish that shortly.
Excellent. Well, that'll be good progress and a good step forward. That's excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that, Jan. So that was item number 6. We've got I think you again, actually, item number 7 on this one. Now, this one is, well, I'll let you explain this one. This is a report by the Section 151 officer on the Section 114 report. So I'll leave you to take us through this.
Thank you again, Chair. Yes, I'm sure I don't need to remind the committee that I issued a Section 114 report on the 23rd of May, which was subsequently considered and endorsed by full council. There were some actions that flowed from that report, and I think probably the most significant of those for this committee was to commission an independent review of the circumstances that gave rise to the Section 114 report. So attached to the report, you have a draft terms of reference for that independent investigation, and the rest of the report brings the committee up to date with what's happened since the council. And although I'm happy to take questions on those, I'm hoping that the committee, you know, will give me a clear steer on whether they're happy with the terms of reference or whether they need to be redrafted, because I would be keen to get on and commission that review. Absolutely.
I think we're all quite keen to see this review take place. I think we've had quite a good discussion before this committee started in our in-camera session, where we spent a bit of time going through the draft terms of reference. I think that, I'm not going to speak for the whole committee, but I think there was a general consensus is that there's possibly a part missing between part 1 and part 2. There's 2 bullet points there. First bullet point says, what was the original basis of the agreement to participate with Northumbria Healthcare Foundation Trust in the Northumbria International Alliance? Who authorised this? And then we moved on then, how, when and where did the arrangements change and who authorised this? I think the general feeling, and correct me committee members if I'm summarising this wrongly, was that there's a bit missing there between those 2 points. And that is, where was the risk management and due diligence process, particularly to technical due diligence into aspects such as money laundering, etc. That was a feeling that was around the room at the time when we had our pre-meeting, is that it almost looks like those 2 points presuppose that everything was fine at the start and then moved on and changed, whereas actually the committee was definitely of the opinion as that the starting point wasn't the best, and there was a lack of clarity, and certainly the word opaque was used about how things were being done, and how the due diligence of this whole enterprise was done, and how it was set up and why the decisions were made to. And we've talked about this before, and you mentioned yourself just a minute ago. There's a lack of clarity and lack of audit trail around a lot of these things. And we get back to the same old problem, unfortunately. But I think the first point that I want to just set us off with is, I think there needs to be, point 2 needs to be 1.A possibly, between the two of them, is about risk management, due diligence, technical due diligence, specifics like money laundering, etc. And the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that summarises what we discussed earlier on. And Councillor Jackson, you have an additional question?
Around dealing with foreign bodies and in certain foreign countries, and I don't think that was done properly, but it needs to be investigated. But there is another point that we made as a committee, and that is that the whole project really started in 2016 with the first approaches and the first contracts, and so I think the start date needs to be brought back to 2016, and that's because we need to know whether there was proper governance around the whole concept from the start and the setting up of the processes from the start. And if you miss that start, you're playing catch up by the following year, 2017. So it's the governance and how it was authorised or not authorised that needs to be made very clear.
Yeah, that's point well made, Councillor. The only dates mentioned here are between 2017 and 2021 in the first paragraph there. But obviously what we're talking about is the pre-trading period where everything was being set up, so it's quite important to get that in there as well.
Yeah, just to be clear, the reference to 2017 to 2021 is the period during which my report says that there was unlawful trading. But you're quite right. We do, if we're going to look at how the whole enterprise was originally established, we do need to go back to inception in 2016, and that will be the intention. Okay, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Jan. The fact that things have gone wrong is beyond dispute. Otherwise, you wouldn't have needed to issue a 114 notice. I'm sort of concerned. We had a little bit of a discussion earlier about processes being overridden, and that kind of, I think, is around the recommendations that will come out of this. It's going to identify what went wrong, and presumably make recommendations about what can be done to stop this sort of thing happening in the future. So can we just make sure that that includes sort of general mechanisms that can stop sort of process being overridden? Because I don't think this council was completely without processes. I think often they were just overridden. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Oliver. And point 5 of the terms of reference talks about how those controls were overridden and the 3 lines of defence circumvented. So hopefully that addresses that point. But you're right, it's a very important point.
It is an important point.
It doesn't. You can have the best controls in the world, but if they don't operate in practice, then they're pretty worthless, aren't they?
Exactly. I think that was pretty much what we could. Councillor Dale, you have.
Yes, I just wanted to go back to, actually it's probably the previous report. One of the points being, it was raised earlier on, is about this informality of reporting back to members and to Cabinet and to actually the Council. And there's all kinds of things that were discussed, but obviously it seems to all been rather informal again. And I think that once again we need to go back to this lack of good governance, lack of diligence, good due diligence, to ensure that in future anything moving forward is open and there's no more of these formalities or decisions taken. And I think that I would like that to be included, to see where the issues were, where things were informal, not properly documented, agreed, decision taking, etc., which is part of due diligence, of course. But if you could add that in particular, because obviously some members were included in it, and there has to be a reporting mechanism to say that people were included or whatever. But there has to be lessons learned from it all. That's the big thing, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dale. Okay. I'm taking that was pretty much sums up our thoughts on this particular one, because it is quite important, because I think that as a committee we're being asked to endorse the terms of reference, which is quite important, and B, we certainly don't want to get off on the wrong foot with this, because we won't get a second chance to do this investigation if we get off on the wrong foot with it. So if you're happy with the suggestions that have been made, Jan, on this one.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. So what I would propose to do is to circulate some slightly amended terms of reference through you to the committee. Yeah. And that will allow us to get on with commissioning the review ahead of the September meeting, if that's acceptable to members.
I think we're all as keen as you are to really crack on and make sure that this happens. So we don't want to hold this up any longer, but I think now is the time to get these changes and tweaks made when we can. That's excellent. So I think if there's no more commentary on that, I think we've been asked to endorse the draft terms of reference. Well, I think we can sort of tentatively endorse them pending the tweaks that you're going to make.
Yes, with those amendments that
which you're going to pass on as fast
yes.
as we can get them through. So we'll do that offline. That's great. Okay, well, thank you for that. Right, no more questions on that one. What I'm going to do now is slightly change the running order, because the next item, item 8, was going to be the review of external inspection reports, adult and children's services. We have got colleagues to present that, so thank you for coming. But because certain officers have to get away quickly today, I'm going to bring the external audit summary forward to this point, and if Cameron can give us his summary of external audit.
There we go. I'll start off with 2019-20, if that's okay, Chair. So 2019-20, the committee will be aware that we issued the opinion on the financial statements some time ago now, but we did not issue the value for money conclusion, partly due to some of the issues that have just been discussed around about international. We are currently drafting the value for money conclusion for 19-20 based on a combination of the Section 151 officers, Section 114 and 114A reports in relation to international, and also the CALA report. Sorry, I should really call it the Solstice Report. The Solstice Report has been considered by the Council on a couple of occasions over the last couple of months. Unsurprised to hear that it will be an adverse value for money conclusion for 19-20. What we're currently doing is working out the years that things relate to, therefore to make sure we report in the right year. So anything that's historic, that's something that's come up that was applicable to 2019-20, we will be rolling that into the 19-20 value for money conclusion. That's what's taking a little bit of time just unpicking it. We then will be moving on to 2021. 2021 in terms of the audit of the accounts, we are a fair way down the track. Jan and I had a catch up on Monday. A lot of the testing is now complete. The work on Advanced Northumberland, the audit of that's been signed off. We've reviewed the working papers. Because of the difference between the group accounts and the advanced accounts, we've got some top-up testing to do around investment property. We are still working with Jan and her team around about some of the disclosures in the 2021 accounts, notably senior officer remuneration and some issues around about exit packages. That should put us in a position where, well, we can conclude the testing in the audit, we can't conclude the audit, and I'll come back to why in a second. In terms of value for money for 2021, that will flow from 1920. Anything specific to 2021 will be flow through there. You'll be aware, Chair, from the briefing we gave the Audit Committee earlier in the year, the code changed for 2021. We moved away from a qualified, unqualified value for money conclusion to either a significant weakness exists or it doesn't. Where it does exist, we issue a recommendation. We'll need to consider the issues we end up raising in 1920 as part of that consideration. That takes me to 21-22. The proposal is to bring the audit plan to the September committee. And we have resourced to get the audit testing done in the accounts, etc., by Christmas. The deadline this year is November, so we'll be a bit late, but that's due to the backlog existing already for the County Council accounts. The big issue in relation to the accounts relates to your infrastructure assets. It's not just your infrastructure assets, it's every council in the country's infrastructure assets, because you may or may not have be aware that an issue was raised by some audit suppliers early in the year, which essentially has put a pause in signing off all audits with infrastructure assets. At the moment, there is an ongoing consultation process being led by SIPFA to try and come up with a resolution, at least in the short term, that allows auditors to issue audit reports with the need for a longer-term solution to the issue going forward. The issue is fundamentally infrastructure assets are roads, bridges, culverts, all that sort of stuff. A lot of those are very old. The way that those should be accounted for is when you replace something, you should write the bit that's been replaced out of the accounts if it's got residual value, and replace it with the value of the new thing that you've bought, so surface of a road. It sounds quite esoteric, and it's not exactly the most exciting accounting concept in the world. One might argue what it actually means, but it is in your balance sheet, it is in the whole of government accounts balance sheet, so therefore it does form part of the accounts, which has to be audited. I think there are two solutions. Either the solution is arrived at that everybody can live with, but that solution involves a degree of pragmatism that isn't always in line with account setting bodies' expectations, to put it diplomatically. In that circumstance, it may well be we end up in a situation where all of the external auditors in the country are qualifying the accounts on the valuation of infrastructure assets, effectively. Now, so that's not a Northumberland only issue, that's every single council with material infrastructure assets. So in practical terms, that's every London Borough, Unitary Council, Metropolitan Council, old style county council, and some other bodies that hold material infrastructure assets. So it's not a particular issue for you. You've got the same issue everybody else has got, essentially, in that regard. So we're all sort of watch this space on that front. When we've got a solution to that, we'll come back to the committee with what that's likely to be. My gut feeling is, at the moment, that we may end up in a situation where we basically qualify. So your audit report would say, the accounts of the Northumberland County Council present fairly the income and expenditure of the council and financial position, etc., except for, and then below that there's a basis for qualified opinion that says the reason for this is as follows. And that's something clearly all the suppliers will be talking to the National Audit Office as a group about, to make sure that we're as consistent as you can ever get audit suppliers to the sector to be. And in most cases we are very consistent.
That's the word that was running through my mind, was consistency. That we don't want, obviously, say qualified message in accounts for Northumberland if it's not going to appear in other people. So we'll have the same treatment of this as every other council that has the same problem in the country. In other words, we're not going to have a...
It may, of course, be, Chair, that some councils have been accounting for infrastructure assets entirely in accordance with code expectations. I have my doubts. But it isn't possible that people have got really robust arrangements to control the componentisation of expenditure on infrastructure assets. But if you're bored, if you get a few sets of accounts from around about the country, if you just take the valuation of infrastructure assets in the balance sheet and you put it on a graph, you will see that for some councils it's quite a steep increase. For some it is a slightly less increase. Most fall into this small increase over a period of time, but some have got a big increase. The ones with the big increase, I'm incredibly sceptical they could possibly be accounting for this correctly. Because all that's happening is they're just adding in the new assets, not writing the old ones out. That's why it's gone up so much. Right. So we'll see where we get on that. It's not a Northumberland issue, as I said. Watch this space. We're sort of all hoping it's resolved relatively soon, because if it doesn't get resolved, nobody's accounts for 2021 that haven't been signed off yet will be getting signed off. That's a lot. And none of the 21-22 accounts that are currently being prepared for publication by the end of this month will be getting signed off.
Okay.
Which is obviously an issue for the National Audit Office, who audit the whole of government accounts.
Yes.
And therefore HMT, etc., etc.
Right. Okay. So
I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
That's fine. Well, thank you for that. It's clear as always, Cameron. Councillor Dale, you have your hand.
Yes, sorry about that. Actually, probably the public will be very interested about the state of the roads or the valuation or whatever. No. Yes, I think what I was going to say is that if you're living in, if you're a councillor in London, you probably have an easier job than you probably have here. I don't know, but that's the question. You know, if you're living in Knightsbridge or that, the Kingston, whatever the council is there, as against the work you have to do, is the work enormous because of the actual size of Northumberland and its infrastructure?
So, in terms of the audit work we have to do, the first thing to bear in mind is it's always governed by the concept of materiality. So our approach is fundamentally based on the materiality we set at the county council level, single entity. That then informs the testing we undertake, the way that if we decide to sample test, which generally speaking is something we would probably have to do in this area, then all of that is governed by something called performance materiality, which is a lower number, and that then determines the size of the sample we take. If we then find errors from the sample testing we undertake, then clearly the first thing we tend to do is extrapolate that, see whether or not it could be material. If it could be material, then we have to consider what else we're going to do to get a sufficient assurance not to qualify. So it's actually quite complicated. And I think in this instance, probably have to talk to Jan at some point around about whether or not we have to do some controls testing around the controls the County Council might have in place to do it properly. My gut feeling again is that most councils, the controls in that area probably aren't as robust as maybe and others tried to resolve this issue some time ago, but it was going to be a very, very complicated annual exercise. It was going to cost quite a lot of money, and it was sort of long grassed at that point in time. Whether that becomes part of the solution going forward, I don't know at this stage.
Okay.
It's a watch this space.
Thank you for that.
It's a watch this space situation.
This
Thank you for that, Cameron. Well, I think we've probably exhausted all the questions we can have on that. I'm conscious of the time, which
Sorry, Chair, there's just one other thing I did mention in the pre-meeting. So we have been in correspondence with the local elector over the last week, and Rob Murphin at the council. We have not had a formal question, nor have we had a formal objection from a member of the public, but we have had a matter that's been brought to our attention. We will be keeping an eye on that in terms of the correspondence between council officers and a member of the public to see whether or not the issue is resolved. And we'll clearly be in touch with Jan and subsequently the Audit Committee if that does turn into a formal question of the auditor and or a formal objection to 21-22 accounts.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. We'll keep us in touch with how that pans out. Thank you. Okay, as I say, I'm conscious of the time. Some officers have to leave. Yeah, thank you, Jan. Yeah, that's fine. That's not a problem. You and Cameron as well. So we'll let you leave, and thank you for your contributions. Okay, so apologies to colleagues. We had to reshuffle a little bit there, but we now can move on, I think, to agenda item 8. Which is the review of external inspection reports for adult and children's services. And this is going to be presented by...
It's myself, Alan Hartwell.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, I'm Alan Hartwell from Children's Services. And as the report covers external inspection activity within Children's Services and Adult Services, I'm joined today by Alan Curry, who is one of the senior managers in Adult Services, and I'm sure Alan will be happy to take and respond to any questions about the Adult Services content within the report. Members will be aware that this is one of a series of regular reports that this committee receives every 6 months. It provides an up-to-date position with regards to external inspection activity, and with permission, Chair, I will also provide information about what has happened subsequent to the report being submitted. There's been a fair amount of activity in the last couple of weeks. I won't go through the detail of what's in the report, but just in terms of the sequence that the report runs in, I will just go through briefly some of the highlights. For Adult Services, the report details all of the inspection activity that's taken place within the last 6 months, and you will see from the table that's within the report that there has been a considerable amount of inspection activity within the last 6 months. It is also worth, I think, making the point that just as is the case with schools, that some schools are very large, some schools are very small, it's also the case that some adult social care providers support numerous clients into the hundreds, and some of those adult social care providers also support a very small number of clients as well. So it's just worth noting that that there is that level of difference, and not all inspection judgments impact on the same number of clients. I think it is fair to say. I'll just move on to the Children's Services section of the report, and this is where there is new information. Just with regards to the section on children's residential care homes, the report mentions that we were awaiting the inspection report for Conewood Children's Home. We actually received that yesterday, and that received a judgment again of good. That means that all of the local authority run children's residential homes are all judged as being either good or outstanding. Because Phoenix House moved from a judgment of requires improvement to a judgment of good within this period. So that's really positive news. Chair, at this point I'll also mention what's new, because members will note that within the report I did say that we were awaiting a focused visit from Ofsted, and literally the day after this report was submitted in the papers, we got the phone call from Ofsted to say that we were going to experience a focused visit. That visit is actually being undertaken at the moment. The preparation began last Tuesday in terms of providing a lot of case lists, etc., a lot of documentation to Ofsted, and 3 Ofsted inspectors are actually on site yesterday and today talking to members of staff, going through cases, looking at documentation, etc. So it is certainly too soon to be able to provide any information on the outcome of that focused visit, but that will be available because there will be a report that will go into the public domain, and it will be reported on in 6 months' time when this report comes back to this committee. Just in terms of the subject matter, that focused visit is in relation to children who are looked after and what is being done with regards to planning and achieving permanency for them. And so that's the subject matter for that particular focused visit. The report also mentions about inspection activity with regards to schools. It's a positive picture. We've seen improvements in terms of the proportion of schools that are judged to be good and outstanding. And the report provides some detail on the inspection activity within the last 6 months, and it also provides a link to a presentation that was provided to the Children's Services Scrutiny Committee with regards to the impact of the local authority school improvement team. The report also details the latest position with regards to early years inspections. Again, that's a positive picture with regards to the inspections for early years. And it also provides information about a pilot inspection that we were asked to participate in by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission with regards to special educational needs and disabilities. That was an area-wide pilot inspection, so it involved not just the local authority but also colleagues from health services as well, within adult services, children's services as well. The link to the report that went to the Council Scrutiny Committee is provided within this report, as well as a paragraph just saying what the conclusions were. But it's fair to say that it was felt to be a positive experience and it was worthwhile participating in that report. There isn't any judgments or written letter about this because it was a pilot. So basically what's in the report is what there is to share with regards to that. And I think, Chair, that brings us up to date with regards to the inspection activity within adult services and within children's services. But happy to take any questions, and obviously if I can't answer them, I'll take them back to the specialists within the service area, and likewise for Alan. Okay,
thank you, Anna. Well, there's a lot of positivity in this report, I think it's fair to say, isn't there? Particularly around the schools aspect, where things look like they definitely are improving quite a bit. And actually, we're now the overall figure of percentage of special schools judged by Ofsted is a good outstanding 78% at the end of June. So that's good. I mean, these figures are getting better most of the time. There's one set of figures that's gone down slightly, which is adult social care, which has gone down very slightly. And you do sort of try and tease out what the reasons were for that in there. What's your general flavour of why that's slightly going down in terms of percentages?
In relation to adult services?
Yeah.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, should I respond to that one, Chair? Obviously, the pandemic impacted significantly on adult social care services, and the inspection regimes responded to some aspects of the pandemic, so they've had a focus on infection prevention and control measures in care homes in particular. I think at times some of our social care services are caught a little bit wrong-footed when there's a change in the inspection regime. So the inspection regime is refreshed on a regular basis. We've seen in the last month or so new measures come in around training requirements. And again, I think the inspections that follow that type of change can be more risky to the provider. I think it takes them a little while to catch up with what the focus of an inspection is going to be on. We do think that the staffing issues and recruitment and retention issues that exist in social care have an impact as well on the quality of services and subsequently on the outcomes of inspections as well. We'd really like to see a much more stable workforce if we could in social care, but of course that is we reflect a national picture here. that the sector is struggling at this point in time, and that impacts on the quality of a service. We do try and get upstream of issues, so we're putting a lot of work in to build the resilience of services and try and get upstream of inspections, make sure, you know, we provide whatever training we're resourced to be able to provide, and really build some resilience of the managers so that they can get a grip of managing the service as well, and treat the staff as best possible, and really try and resolve some of those workforce issues where it's within our gift. But
right, okay, thank you. So it doesn't sound like this is a Northumberland specific issue by any stretch. This sounds like this might be a nationwide problem, because the staffing issues, I understand, are pretty well common right across the sector, right across the country now, aren't they?
They are, unfortunately, yeah. It repeats in lots of different sectors, but I think pre-pandemic it was difficult in social care, and I think as we've come out of it, it's certainly worsened it. But you're right, it is a national issue.
Okay, yes, I see. Okay, we'll open this up for questions. Councillor Daly, you have a question?
Thank you. Can I just follow on, because basically the quality QQCC is developing its monitoring approach. Can I just ask you, does it actually work with the authorities who are actually overlooking the social care, the homes? So will they discuss their changes in their approach work with you? So, sorry, so it isn't just, you know, we're changing our approach, we're dashing in, we're going to do this, that. They're actually working with you for you to have a better understanding of what the changes are?
Yes, they do, and you know they should publish when there are proposed changes, and we should have some pre-warning. We do work very closely with them. We have regular information sharing meetings. We discuss individual providers in depth, and in between the meetings we work very closely with them to share intelligence that we've got about providers, and we're upfront. You know, if we think there's an issue or a problem, it's right that becomes the focus of an inspection as well. And you know, but we do have a very good relationship with Care Quality Commission.
Thank you. That is helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I think this is overall a very positive report. I mean, obviously there are issues in there which are common issues across the country, which Northumberland isn't unique in trying to resolve these issues, but obviously things are moving. So overall, though, I think we're taking a lot of positivity from this report, because things are generally getting better in a lot of areas. So well done, and thank you for bringing this report to us, and we'll see the next one in 6 months' time. Okay, well, it'll be even more positive, no doubt, than this one here. So thank you for your input. Okay, thank you. Right, if you need to leave now, please just. Right, moving on. Agenda item 9. This is the draft annual report of the Firefighters Pension Scheme Local Pension Board. Now, I don't have a presenter for this. No, this is a very individual situation. Because normally somebody speaks to the report and actually takes us through it, but we have it here in front of us. I have to present this one myself, I think, and being an expert on pension schemes as I am. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not quite sure why this has been presented without anybody to talk to it and actually give us any kind of feedback on it. Should we park this for a future meeting? Because I think it's not much point in actually reading this through without an expert here to talk us through the detail of it. I'm certainly not qualified to. I don't know. Yeah, it's a draft annual report now. I'm not sure whether somebody expects this to be rubber stamped by this committee, because I don't think we're in a position unless somebody presents it.
Previously, there's been it's just a note, and previously we've had the opportunity to sort of raise any questions. So I guess if there aren't any questions, we can just note it.
Well, it is what it is. I'm a little bit reluctant to sort of say, let's pass this on the nod in case there's anything in there that turns out to bite later on. why don't we ask for this to be brought back and somebody to present this at the next meeting? Because I think that, or we could possibly, if it's urgent, we have to get it out. We can take it offline and maybe syndicate it offline for authorisation offline. If there's, is everybody happy with that? I'm not over keen on the committee just rubber stamping things without actually really understanding what it is they're looking at. So let's park this for the time being. Okay, thanks, Andrea. Okay, item number 10. Now, we do have a presenter for this. This is the Internal Audit Charter, and Kevin MacDonald, the Head of Internal Audit, will present it. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a report which we periodically bring to committee. I last brought this report to committee in July 2020. I know committee will be aware that the work of internal audit is governed by the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards and its accompanying local government application note. There are a number of, I suppose, underlying principles to the work of the team, which are codified in an internal audit charter, which is required under the standards to be approved by the audit committee. So that's why the report is before committee today. The reason we bring it periodically is just to make sure that it's up to date. There are no significant changes within the current charter before committee this morning from the previous version. The only changes are cosmetic in terms of removing any reference to our former shared internal audit risk management service, which obviously is not applicable now. But there are no changes in terms of the content or materiality of that content to bring to committee's attention. Obviously within there, it does talk about some of the important principles of the work that we undertake, specifically things like the scope and authority of the work that we have, the rights of access requirements that are available to me and the team should we need them, leading all the way back to the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015 and the statutory nature of the role that I fulfil. And obviously then linked on from that, it's around the objectivity and the independence which we are required to demonstrate. And obviously the Charter details some of the ways that we demonstrate that independence and the, I guess, somewhat unique role that I have in terms of my position within the authority and my responsibility to you as an audit committee and demonstrating my independence through you as a committee, not necessarily I beg your pardon, so I report to you as an audit committee in my name and my name alone, rather than maybe other committees within the council where it would normally come through a more senior officer. But as I say, Chair, no cosmetic changes to that report, but I'm more than happy to take any questions which members may have.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So obviously this is a report which has just been tweaked, I think we can say, just for to say make sure that it is in line with the current way things are working, but nothing substantial, no substantive changes in here, no material changes. So I think we could probably almost, as a committee, take this as read because we have seen this before, and this has been authorised and discussed with us before. The changes look fairly minor throughout. Okay, so shall we just accept this one? Councillor Sesswood, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just checking. Are we just commenting on the fact that the structure of this report or commenting on what's within it, or is that coming later?
So, any question on the report or the appendix?
Because you know, I don't necessarily disagree with with the structure of this report. However, if I pick up things within it that may have not worked the way that it was planned to have worked, otherwise I would have disagreed with what's on here. So if I go, I'm just going to pick up a few points and then I'll let you give an overall summary at the end if that's all right with you, Cap. 2.3, it says vital role providing assurances to the organisation evaluate the government's arrangements in place. So one question would be, has this worked in light of the colour report? If I go down to section 3, it mentions that, actually I'll come back to that one, sorry. If I go to section 5.5.1, it mentions about unrestricted access to the board and senior management, because you have to be independent. I mean, the question would be, has that happened? Over the page to 5.6, 9. When performing your work, internal auditors will be alert to the possibility of internal wrongdoings, errors and omissions. Failure to comply with management policy and conflict of interests. And at the top of the next page, about suspicion of fraud, corruption and improper conduct are properly reported. And finally, the last point I want to make, if I can find it, is 9.2, where it says, should the head of internal audit and risk management consider that a matter of governance or control is so serious as to warrant communications to other officers of the organisation or external agencies such as the police. The reason I picked all those points are because of the Keller report, section 114, and everything else that we know that's been going on recently. Does it mean that the application of what's in front of us, which we all agree is probably okay, has actually happened? Full stop.
Okay, Kevin, I mean, I think I'm getting the drift of what you're saying, is that this is, on paper, the perfect world, this is what will happen. And what you're saying, I think, Councillor, is that do you feel comfortable that in the reality matches the...
In reality, things have obviously gone amiss, gone awry, and if the systems are in place, why haven't they possibly been picked up? Why haven't action been taken earlier, or whatever? I'm not going to answer for Kevin, but I can think of an answer. But I think I'm going to pass this to Kevin if you're happy to answer the question.
Absolutely, Chair. I think it might be the same answer. Thank you, Councillor Sesford. I think my answer to all of your questions in summary is yes. I do believe this has happened, and believe it continues to happen. The direct question around my unrestricted access, for example, yes, I can confirm that has happened, has been in place. There are no matters of concern to me. If there had have been, as a committee, you would already have been aware of it because it's incumbent upon me to report that. I think the important point, which I think would summarise all of that, I think comes back to when we've talked around the 3 lines of defence before, and I think internal audit cannot be, we can't look at absolutely everything. So what we have to do is, on the information we have, or I have, is form that plan, which then comes through committee to get that agreement that we're looking in the right areas. We then do that work and I report back to you as a committee on the findings of that and then provide an annual opinion. Now, obviously, that opinion can only be based on either work that the team have done or, where I make specific reference, other assurance sources that I am aware of. And that's as far as that reporting can go. Obviously, we could have an army of auditors looking at everything. That's clearly not proportionate. But there are aspects clearly in other reports which would probably come under some of those assurance sources as well, to think, right, part of our role, I think, moving forward is to think how we encompass all of that and gain all of those assurances as a committee moving forward. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy that the things that should have happened from an internal audit perspective have.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. So if I'm reading that right, what you're saying is that you don't see that any of these things, these criteria, have been breached necessarily for the work that you've done. Correct. But you are accepting that internal audit is a very finite resource and cannot be expected to cover everything. So things will happen within the large authority like this where the auditors weren't cited of what was going on, but you are not the only source of control in the organisation. There are 3 lines of defence which involve managers and so on.
Correct, yeah. But I don't feel I've been restricted or hoodwinked or any sort of words like that in terms of the work that I've been able to undertake.
I think that's one of the key points, I think, for Councillor Sesford's question.
I understand fully what you're saying, Kevin. However, if you read within the Keller report, it does say that stuff wasn't open, wasn't accessed by everybody. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you had an issue with, as a lot of other people seem to have had an issue with. And the other point would be that you can't cover everything. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But if points are then brought forward by same members or other officers, then surely that's therefore a targeted direction that you could go for. Because members have mentioned things before, but action wasn't immediate.
We have got mechanisms, Kevin, for feeding back into your audit plan, haven't we? So as a committee, I know that we can actually ask you to actually put a focus on certain things. Yeah. And if we become aware of something being an issue, and we have done this because we have fed into your audit plan, certainly since I've been here, we've always had meetings to feed into your audit plan. So we can try and sort of like tilt the steering of your ship a little bit to the directions that we think are important from our personal experience. What other sort of inputs do you have to that? Because that probably would answer your questions, so make sure that you're not sailing in that direction when all the risks are in this direction.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Sesford. Yes, you are correct. So Audit Committee can make me aware of concerns or areas of interest, as can any officer, any elected member, members of the public even. Now, what I am duty-bound to do is to receive those and consider those within the wider assessment of risk across the organisation that I'm required to do, and form a judgment as to whether I believe there is a sufficient risk there to divert audit resource into looking at some of those issues, being alert to potential bias or malice or other sort of things which may be within some of those. However well made that referral may come to me, there may be other aspects which I'm aware of. Should I feel that there is a matter there which is worthy of being looked at or investigated, I can also then consider other assurance sources, so it may not be internal audit that undertakes that work. So I know, Councillor Sesford, you referred to other instances that have been referred to audit. I can think of one particular case where I know that the external auditor was already aware and taken action around that, so it wouldn't make sense for internal audit to duplicate that work. If one stream is already in train, I would then think, well, we'll let that assurance source fulfil the journey that it's on and let that process be completed. And then I can take a view as to whether I'm content with that or there's additional work that I need to do from an internal audit perspective. So it's trying to balance that to make sure that we don't have everybody looking at the same things and other things which kind of go unlooked at. So I hope that answers your query.
Okay, that seems quite clear, Kevin. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Sesford, in terms of that? Councillor Dale, you had your hand up.
I know Kevin is actually new in position, and actually this does mirror a lot of the external auditors' regulations, rules under the Local Government Act, so they're all there. Just to say, noting though that EY, I think in their report of 1819, did actually say in their bare value for money that actual internal audit service was not independent then, and that was in 1819. I don't think anything was ever done. I don't see it, but it was there in the paper. And I don't know what progressed, but maybe that's a lesson that we should listen more to what external auditors are saying about a service that's being delivered. However, that is there. But anyway, this has moved on, and I think we're here to deliver this, look at the charter, and we'll hold you to account. And I'm sure that everybody else will hold you to account and bring everything up. But thank you for that. And I do support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Kevin, do you want?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dale. Yes, just that one specific thing around the independence, which the former external auditor raised. They raised a view that there was an aspect of the arrangements where, in their view, they felt it might not have demonstrated independence. Yeah. Those, without going into the arguments that were there again, the arrangements that external auditor brought to our awareness are not now in place.
No, I know.
Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. Just to really sort of pick up on the questions that both Councillor Sesford and Councillor Dale have raised, and it's sort of possibly more of a comment, but a bit of a question. We've had a situation, as Trevor described, where we've had the Cala report, we've had the 2 Section 114 notices. There are some incidents, other things being investigated relating to payoffs and so on. That's all been just reported publicly previously. I think, in my experience, having sort of been on the other side of the table at audit committees between 2017 and 21, I think what we have a sort of a scenario now where the Internal Audit Service is working much more closely with the Audit Committee and is responding really well. I guess the concern I've had is where we have, it's that sort of level of independence. And I'm not sure previously we had that level of independence. This is not a criticism of you or your team, because this was, you know, predating your current role. But where we have almost a sort of inherent conflict, we had a Director of Assurance that had previously been Chief Internal Auditor, and there was but then sort of stepped into the executive. And certainly, you know, went to executive team meetings and things like that. And I that sort of level of kind of being on both sides of the fence really worried me at the time, and I suspect is partly responsible for why some of these things have not been picked up by internal audit. So, are you aware of any plans going forward? I mean, are we going to be able to keep the internal audit absolutely independent and make sure that there are no sort of roles that have influence both within internal audit and within the executive?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes. So I think without revisiting some of the history that Councillor Oliver's talked about, I think it's when the officer that you referred to, the previous Chief Internal Auditor, moved up, I became the Chief Internal Auditor to ensure that independence was maintained. At that time as well, going back to that former report, there was a view, and it was a view that that person was a member of the executive team, and I do not share that view. I think they attended executive team meetings, as do I. That does not make me a member of executive team. And I am comfortable. I can't speak for years ago, as we quite rightly say, but what I can say now is I feel I am able to act independently. I am able to speak with some integrity and honesty to the executive team and executive team members, and then I can come and speak to you as an audit committee without fear or favour. Obviously, some of the messages I sometimes have to report both to you as a committee and to executive team, and indeed cabinet, are not necessarily some of the messages that they would wish me to be imparting. It's great when we can come and give good messages, obviously, but there will be times where that's not always the case. And what I have to be able to do is to be sure that the work of me, the rest of the team, is based on an evidence background where I can just present that evidence fairly in a balanced manner and report what we found. And I am comfortable that I have been able to do that, I am doing it, and I will be able to keep doing that.
Right, so it's really about being able to speak truth to power, and that's encouraging that if you're confident you can do
I think maybe more importantly, being able to demonstrate it, which is maybe the more important part than the fact that it wasn't in place, it just maybe wasn't demonstrated.
I think that is actually a very, very key point that you made right at the end there, Kevin, is it's not just that you know it's in place, we have had this discussion at various points this morning, not just doing the right thing, but being able to prove you've done the right thing and showing you're doing the right thing. And I think that's the key thing. And I think what the Charter should do, I think, is make sure that this is all transparent. The word opaque's been used in this meeting this morning a couple of times, and there's nothing opaque about this. If this is followed to the letter, this should provide that kind of assurance for us as a committee, for the council as a whole, and for you also as well. It gives you the assurance as an independent person that you have the backing that you can do your job properly, which is something we very often forget, I think, is that the auditors need to be protected and to be able to do their job properly, because you all come to speak to powerful people and give them messages they don't want to hear sometimes. Indeed. And it isn't a very good position to be in. Anne, you have one more question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it seems to be all the way through, is that people have not taken action against their concerns in an appropriate way. And basically, you know, if I have any concerns, I haven't had any to give to Kevin, but I will straight send them to me. I have anything, I go straight to the external auditor with all the documentation and backup so they can interact. Because if I have a concern, now there's been a failure in this council to think that actually things are being done properly, and they could have been taken up with the external auditor. And, well, just a second, the external auditor, you can report, if they haven't responded with an outcome, then you can go further up. There's a massive ledger all the way up to the top and override them if they're not coming back. But that is why we're here in public service, to ensure that things are done properly for the benefit of our residents. And we do have that, you know, I actually always have that, you know, I have to actually do what I think is right. And the point being is we've got internal audit now, it's working, it's good, I have total respect for you. If you don't, I'll let you know if I've got a problem. But you always have the external audit to go to and send everything to. And, you know, not a, I don't like this or this, that and the other, but actually documented stuff where you feel unhappy about decisions that are being taken or financial payments or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Well, I think the general consensus is, I think you certainly do have the support and the respect of this committee in internal audit. This charter, I think, it has been slightly updated, but we do have to agree it. I think that's one of the questions that you asked us. So can we say, have a show of hands, do we agree this charter? Yes, we do.
I have two hands.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much for that, Kevin. Okay, so now we had a slight change to the running order, which means it would have normally been Cameron now, but he's done his report, so we now have urgent business. I haven't been informed of any urgent business, so there isn't anything in that category. The date of the next meeting will be Wednesday the 28th of September at the usual time of 10:15, but we'll have our pre-meeting as usual at 9:30. We now have to move on to part 2 of the meeting. This is the not for publication side of the meeting, where we ask for members of the public, press, and to be excluded and to switch off the